The day I bought that old 1923 cabin, I didn't just piss off the HOA, I exposed a lie they'd been hiding for 3 decades. I didn't know it yet, but within weeks they'd send security officers onto my dock with a forged map in their hands, claiming the lakefront I rebuilt with my own blood and sweat somehow belonged to them. And the night they crept onto my porch, cut my cameras, and set fire to my wooden sign. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a quiet little war, and they thought I'd be the one to break first. I wasn't looking for a fight when I came out here. Hell, I'd spent the year drifting after my best friend died in an accident. Walked out of the workshop, boxed up the tools, told myself I'd rebuilt my last dying structure. But grief is weird. It pushes you into silence, then shoves you toward things you thought you'd buried. So when I found the cabin at a hush-hush auction, leaning to one side, roof, sagging windows crooked like an old drunk trying to stand straight, I felt something inside me shift like purpose, waking up after a long sleep. I bought it right there. The first few days at Highland Lake were quiet, almost too quiet. I kept telling myself the long stairs were small-town curiosity, the joggers slowing down as they passed my driveway, the paddleboarders drifting a little too close to my shore. But there was something sharper in those looks, something cold. Conversations at the general store flatlined the moment I walked in. A guy on the trail muttered, "Outsiders messing with the lake," to no one in particular. I laughed it off. Shouldn't have. I stepped into the cabin that first morning and the air tasted like dust, cedar, and old memories. The place was crooked, tired, wounded, but it felt alive. So I unboxed the tools I'd sworn I'd never use again, and day by day, board by board, I brought the cabin back to life. Replaced rotten beams, pulled 1948 newspapers out of the walls, hummed to myself without realizing it, something my buddy used to do when he worked. The silence was heavy without him, but the cabin didn't judge. By month 4, I fixed the dock. Standing knee-deep in cold lake water, tightening bolts while ducks watched me like grumpy supervisors. That's when I noticed the paddleboarder again, same woman, same stare, like my mere existence offended her. She drifted away without a word. That look stuck with me longer than it should have. Then one morning, right after I finished restoring the porch and hung the cedar plaque I branded myself, 1923, I found a cream-colored envelope sitting perfectly centered on my top step. Gold pine tree emblem, calligraphy handwriting, Lake Wind Pines HOA. I wasn't in their HOA. My deed didn't mention them. My cabin was 57 feet outside their jurisdiction. But the letter didn't care about facts. It cared about control. Unauthorized decorative containers, unapproved lighting fixtures, historic signage causing implied status confusion, and a fine of $1,800 if I didn't comply. I grabbed a pen, wrote across their letter, "Not a member, not under your authority. Do not contact me again." Attached a photocopy of my deed, and mailed it with a smiley face sticker just to make a point. I thought that would be the end. You already know it wasn't. 2 days later, I got home from town and saw 2 men standing on my dock matching polos, crisp khaki pants, radios on their hips, and embroidered words, "Lake Wind Enforcement." The taller one crouched near my antique lanterns, snapping pictures like they were crime evidence. The shorter guy glared at my flour barrels like they personally insulted his bloodline. I didn't yell. I didn't ask who they were. I just hit record on my phone. "Gentlemen," I said, "can I help you trespass more efficiently?" They tried to pull authority they didn't have. Fake citations, fake jurisdiction, fake confidence. When they left, I called the sheriff but got told it was a civil boundary dispute. In other words, good luck, buddy. That's when the tension in the air changed. Flyers started appearing, folded into my gate, tucked under porch boards, slipped into my mailbox. Outliers undermine harmony. The town got colder. People avoided eye contact. The paddleboarder drifted by again, slower this time, like she was confirming something. I felt it happening. They were isolating me, poisoning the social well before they made their real move. The real move arrived on day 10, wrapped in a high-visibility vest and uncertainty. A young woman knocked on my door. Clipboard, measuring wheel. She barely looked old enough to rent a car. "I'm with Lake Wind Pines Infrastructure Review," she said. "Wrong property," I answered. She handed me a laminated map anyway, and my stomach dropped. My straight boundary line, the one I'd verified before buying the cabin, had been replaced with a graceful little curve that nudged just far enough onto my shoreline to justify oversight. I took a picture. She fled like she was afraid of what she'd just delivered. I went straight to the county office, slapped the map on the counter, and watched the clerk pull up the public GIS map, which had already been edited to match the fake boundary. But the internal map, the real one, was untouched. Metadata showed who made the fraudulent edit. User Caldridge Admin 2, Karen Aldridge, HOA President. That was the first moment I felt real fear. Not for my safety, but fear I might actually lose everything legally quietly without a single punch being thrown. And I'll admit it, I thought about giving up, selling the cabin, leaving the lake to people who wanted everything to look the same, smell the same, live the same. I asked myself if I'd made a mistake coming here, if maybe I was the problem. A man can convince himself he's wrong when enough people push him hard enough. That night I walked the perimeter with a flashlight. The air was cold, still too still. When I rounded the corner of the cabin, I smelled it before I saw it, burning cedar. My 1923 sign, charred, blackened, curling. A flame had licked up the wall, leaving a scar across the original timber. Someone had been on my porch while I was outside checking the lights. Someone had cut every camera wire clean. Someone had picked the lock, smashed the DVR, and left without a trace. A message. I stood there in the dark with the burnt cedar smell hanging in the air and felt something inside me click into place. Not rage, not panic, just clarity. They weren't trying to scare me off. They thought they already had. They thought I was one step from cracking. They were wrong. I heated the branding iron, again hotter this time, and pressed it into a fresh cedar board until the numbers hissed red and black 1923, still standing. Then I bolted a steel plate underneath private property, not part of any HOA. If they wanted a statement, they got one, but I needed more than defiance. So the next morning I dug through county archives and found a dusty box, Morton vs. Lake Wind Pines, 1992. The HOA had tried this exact playbook 30 years ago. Same lies, same forged boundary shifts, same attempt to swallow shoreline property. And the previous owner, Ellis Morton, had beaten them in court with an injunction that was still legally binding. That afternoon I tracked down his granddaughter, Rebecca. She handed me a box her grandfather had saved for the next poor soul who buys that cabin. Inside was a letter. "If you're reading this, they're trying again. This house stands because I fought for it. Don't let them win." I drove home with that box, riding shotgun, and a different kind of fire burning in my chest. And then the county assessor showed up. Neutral voice, beige blazer, clipboard. He made it sound so reasonable. Until this boundary discrepancy is resolved, the HOA can temporarily manage the shoreline. A custodial arrangement. A custodial arrangement, my ass. It was legalized theft with a polite smile. I called Clayton Sharp Attorney Warhorse, a man who sounded born to fight HOA nonsense. He listened, then said, "Good. Now let's go to war." Our first battle wasn't in a courtroom, it was in the HOA clubhouse. Folding chairs, fluorescent lights, power-tripping board members acting like federal judges. Karen stood there in a navy suit sharp enough to slice through a lie binder thick as a dictionary. She opened it with drama like she practiced in front of a mirror. Unapproved lanterns, unauthorized barrels, emotionally manipulative historic signage, and my personal favorite, nostalgia-driven defiance. Clayton stepped up with a binder half as thick and 10 times more lethal. 1992 injunction, historic registry attempt, original surveys, and then he dropped the bomb. The zoning file the HOA submitted is doctored. Metadata shows it was edited on Ms. Aldridge's device. The room went silent. Karen's jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might crack. The board immediately halted the hearing and kicked the whole thing up to civil court. Karen didn't back down, though. She escalated. Civil court wasn't a clubhouse. Real judge, real rules, real consequences. Karen strutted in with 3 attorneys and enough perfume to fumigate a stadium. They tried every angle boundary shifts, visual harmony, safety hazards. Then Clayton called our witnesses. Rebecca Morton, the county clerk, and finally the untouched original zoning file. When the judge held up the fraudulent map, Karen submitted. Her face hardened. "Ms. Aldridge," she said, "this is no longer a civil dispute. This is evidence of deliberate fraud." Karen finally broke. You could see it happen like glass cracking one quiet fracture at a time. The judge dismissed every claim against me with prejudice, reaffirmed the 1992 injunction, ordered the county to restore all records, and referred Karen's actions for criminal investigation. Document tampering, record interference, attempted property seizure. When it was over, I walked out of that courtroom, not victorious, not triumphant, just steady, solid, unmoved. Exactly what they tried so hard to prevent. A few days later, I hung a new cedar sign beside the porch. 1923, Fisherman's Cabin, survived 3 court battles. And beneath it on the steel plate, not part of any HOA. Visitors welcome, unless your name is Karen. The burn mark on the cabin wall is still there. I'll never sand it off. Some scars aren't flaws, they're reminders. And if there's one thing I learned from this whole damn saga, it's this: bullies only win when the right person walks away.